Welcome to Big Blend Radio, where we celebrate variety and how it adds spice to quality of life. Welcome, everyone, to Big Blend Radio's Nature Connection show. But this is also going to be on our Success Express business show, because on that show, we deal with economics and finance as well. And that's what we're going to talk about. We've got the award-winning author, Bill McKibben, joining us. He's the founder of Third Act and also 350.org, incredible organizations that really work on climate action. And he's also just done so many books, I think over 20 books. His latest book is Here Comes the Sun, A Last Chance for the Climate and a Fresh Chance for Civilization. And we're going to talk a little bit, obviously, about the power of solar power, but the economics of it as well. And you can go to his website, billmckibben.com. Bill, welcome to the show. I should say shows. How are you?
Well, what a pleasure to be with you. And I'm doing great. It's actually a gorgeous, gorgeous day in the mountains of the East. So it's where the humidity has dropped, and so everybody's mood has gone up. It's really nice.
That's good. That's good. I'm really excited to talk about solar energy because, you know, there's been so much development over the years with it and a lot of transformation, wind energy as well. I grew up with solar energy as a kid in Africa. That's how a lot of the tented camps were done, with solar power. And even as we travel the country, we have like a little, it's almost like a pillow with like a balloon that you inflate.
Yep.
And it has a battery in it, and it goes in the sun, and at night you've got a lantern. So there's these things that have been going around for years, right?
Yep.
So it is user friendly, because I think that's important.
What's changed in the last 36 months is that it's gone from the category of alternative energy to the category of this is the most common sense, straightforward way to produce power on planet Earth. You know, for many, many years, solar power was very expensive, and that's what limited it to a lot of kind of niche. I can remember getting my first solar powered calculator back, you know, when I was a kid, and things like that. But now we live on a planet, as of 3 or 4 years ago, where the cheapest way to produce energy is to point a sheet of glass at the sun. And that's a remarkable change. It allows us to imagine the rapid change in almost everything, heading off the worst of the climate crisis. But not just that, producing energy so economically that we can use it for all kinds of things. With massive amounts of cheap electricity, we're able to convert our vehicle fleet to electrics, which are much more economical. We're able to get rid of the furnaces in our houses and replace them with heat pumps. I'm the cook in our house, and instead of using an open fire in the kitchen, we've been using induction cooktops now for years, and they do a beautiful job. This is the future. It's coming very fast. 95% of all new generating capacity built in the last year on this planet and in this country was from sun and wind, from clean energy. So what used to be alternative energy, what used to be, maybe a good analogy is this, what used to be the Whole Foods of energy, nice but pricey, is now the Costco of energy.
I like that.
Cheap, available in bulk, on the shelf, ready to go.
I like this because that's what I was saying, that the consumers side of it, we want things to be user-friendly and cost-effective as well. But also businesses have done this, and companies have really invested in it. I mean, even coal energy plants have changed, and a lot of upgrading. And then now, I know a lot of the subsidies have gone away. Do you think that that's going to damage any of this transformation that's happening?
I think in this country it will damage it, and I think that the president is making a historical mistake, because I think the clear beneficiaries are going to be the Chinese, who are pulling ahead in this technology. The Chinese are installing more clean energy than anyone on Earth, and in the process, they're becoming, well, you've heard of petrostates, but what China's becoming is an electrostate, and they're going to have endless amounts of cheap energy with which to power their economy, giving them a big advantage, and they're getting a big lead in all the technologies that go with it. So, for instance, we're used to thinking of Detroit as the center of automotive excellence in the world, but in fact, the most important car cities on the planet are now a few cities in China whose names I have difficulty pronouncing. They're producing the cheapest and best cars on the planet, and those cars are increasingly winning the global market all over the world, especially the developing world. They'd be winning our markets too. We just won't allow them in the door to compete. It's, we're really watching the Chinese eat our lunch. We're almost serving our lunch to the Chinese, and it's
Wow.
a big mistake.
Yeah, and as we grow with this, because I think once companies understand and they do understand that this is our cheapest source of energy, right? Even electricity plants are starting to use it, right? And in
Yes, yes, of
states,
course.
yeah, there's some states that people would be kind of shocked on that
Oh,
are.
so the two states that are most interesting, I'll tell you the two stories, and you'll see why they're interesting. California, liberal, progressive California got out to the lead on this. They put up so many solar panels that most days now, California generates more than 100% of its electricity from clean energy for long stretches of the day. At night, when the sun drops, the biggest source of supply on the grid in California are batteries that have been soaking up excess sunshine all afternoon. As a result, California is using 40% less natural gas to produce electricity than they were 2 years ago. That's a very big shift. That's the kind of thing that might begin to shave some tenths of a degree off how hot the world eventually gets. But California is no longer in the lead in this country on clean energy. That would be Texas.
Wow.
Ironically, because it's the home to the hydrocarbon industry, but the economics of this stuff are so good that sun, wind, and batteries just keep going up and up and up in the Lone Star State. And one result has been a grid that's much more stable. You'll recall that a few years ago, they were having trouble with blackouts and things in Texas. Well, the head of the Texas utility grid said earlier this year, we're not going to have those problems anymore because we've got so many batteries with so much renewable energy that it's dramatically stabilized the Texas grid. So the Trump administration is trying to stop all this, and they're doing very foolish things. They closed down an almost fully constructed wind farm off the coast of Rhode Island in late August. These things don't make sense, and I don't think that they'll probably, over the long run, derail our transition. Maybe in 10 years, if the attitudes are still in power, then the U.S. will be a kind of
Begging China for sun.
Yes, we'll be a colonial Williamsburg of internal combustion where foreign tourists, if they can get a visa, come to gawk at how people used to live in the olden days. But hopefully
Yeah.
we won't go that route. Hopefully at some point we'll decide to start catching up with the future.
But we do have a voice still, as the citizens right now, and we should use it. And I think number one, read your book. Here Comes the Sun. That really helps and gets. I think you answer a lot of questions in there, and then also you have a great event coming up on September 25th.
We sure do. Sunday, not Earth Day, but Sunday, which falls on the 21st, which is the fall equinox, is going to
Oh,
be
the 20, yeah,
a real occasion for all across the country, hundreds of events to celebrate this rise of renewable energy and to push for policies at the state and local level, since we can't do much in Washington at the moment, that make it much easier to put up this stuff. So, for instance, in the U.S., it costs 3 to 4 times as much to put solar panels on your roof as it does in Australia or the US. Some small fraction of that is because of tariffs on solar panels, but most of it is because we have a Byzantine and Baroque permitting and licensing system here. There are 15,000 municipalities in America. Each one has their own building code, their own team of inspectors. This does not happen in the rest of the country, in the rest of the world. If you're in Australia, or Europe, you call up your contractor on Monday morning and say, I want solar panels on the roof. And by Friday, they're up there churning out power. That's why 40% of the homes in Australia have solar panels on the roof. Here, you go months with inspections and, on and on and on. We can do away with this. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory a couple of years ago put out an app, the Solar App Plus, that allows contractors to get instant permits, really, just by plugging in the type of equipment they're planning to use. California, New Jersey, and Maryland have mandated its use. We need to spread it to many other places. There also are real tools for apartment dwellers or travelers, for that matter, what we're calling balcony solar, which in Europe has become the big thing. Millions upon millions of Europeans have gone to their, whatever the, Belgian equivalent of Best Buy is, and plunk down a couple of €100 and come home with a solar panel designed to be hung from the railing of their balcony in their apartment. And then you just plug a cord directly into the wall, no fancy equipment. This often produces 25% of the power that the apartment uses for free. That's illegal everywhere in America, except in the great state of Utah, where the state legislature earlier this year passed unanimously legislation enabling it. As the state senator who sponsored it said, why should people in, Stuttgart have access to this technology and not the good people of Salt Lake City or Provo? And now you can go on YouTube and watch lots of videos of happy Utahns putting up their new solar panel.
Well, this reminds me of when rain barrels were not allowed. It's
go.
kind of like that. Well, this is part of what I really wanted to talk about too, is all these disasters we're having across the country, which definitely climate change is making it harder. And as these disasters are getting bigger, and in areas like Hurricane Helene going to North Carolina, I know a lot of people there, and we travel there all the time, and they move there to not go through hurricanes again. At the same time, we're getting less weather information, we're getting less funding for these kinds of things. But when there's no electricity and no water, I know that was a huge deal. No electricity, my mind was going, and I know when there was a snowstorm once recently in the last couple of years kind of thing, and people are like, oh, well, you can't charge your electric cars. And I'm like, well, if you did solar, you could charge your electric cars, right?
Absolutely.
And if we had those panels you're talking about for disasters, that would be a godsend, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. So we started to really sense this a few years ago in Texas. Remember, they had that big freeze and power was off for days and all of that. Well, there were a number of people who had bought those big Ford F-150 pickups, the electric ones, the EV, the Lightning model. And there were lots and lots of them just plugging their car into their home and running their home for days off the power in the battery of their truck. There are thousands. Where I live in Vermont, the biggest single power plant is the virtual power plant comprised of 4,000 or 5,000 batteries in the homes' basements of Vermonters that the local utility ties together to call on in times of difficulty, high peak loads and that kind of thing. The last big hurricane across Florida, there were a number of pictures of one town that had gone entirely solar, and it was the only place across the center of Florida that had power to do the things that people need during the horrible fires in Los Angeles in January. Many communities, because they had to shut the power lines off to prevent more fires, many communities, it was people who had solar panels on their roof that were the place where everybody in the neighborhood went to charge their phone, to, get water because they still had a water pump running, that kind of stuff. This is, solar power is civil defense in this way. Just what you want in an emergency.
In hospitals and places like that too. Very, very important to have electricity, and that gives you water. If you have electricity, you can have clean water. So it seems
exactly right
to me. The other thing I really wanted to touch on too is I know the current administration is working really hard on, well, they love AI, right? The whole thing about AI, everybody's still arguing about it, but it's not going to go away, right? And that's what we're hoping with solar. It's not going away. The sun is still there. As we increase with AI, and cryptocurrency keeps moving, they have these massive, they're sucking up the power. They're taking over, like, I think Vitalik was talking about that it was like the size of Chile or Argentina was how much.
If we're going to do this stuff, the only way to do it, the only way to do it is by putting up lots of cheap renewable energy. Among other things, it's the only thing that goes up fast, and they need these data centers fast. So at the moment, we're in the worst of all worlds. Demand is increasing from things like data centers, and the administration has artificially constricted the supply by saying we're not going to build we're going to shut down solar and wind power. If you increase the demand and reduce the supply, what happens to the price? Electricity prices are up 10% so far this year in this country. That's a lot. That's a lot faster than the rest of inflation. And so we're paying the penalty for not being, I mean, maybe maybe artificial intelligence will come to our rescue and someone will ask it, what should we do? And it will say, build a lot
So
more solar panels. Yeah.
yeah. One thing too is I know a lot of solar and energy discussions or arguments, I should say, these days. There's the argument of solar and batteries being not good for the land and being a problem. Is that true?
Not a problem. Look, I mean, it's not that it's an absolutely free lunch. There is no free lunch, but there are definitely more expensive and less expensive lunches. So think about, say, a battery. It takes lithium to run it, and you have to mine lithium someplace. And so we should be careful where we mine it and how we mine it and things. But think about the difference. If you go mine some lithium and you stick it in a battery, there it sits for a quarter century doing its thing. If the battery eventually degrades, now we can and do recycle lithium out of those batteries and just start all over again. It's still there. If you go mine some coal today, what do you do with it? You set it on fire. Then you have to go mine some more tomorrow. So the latest data I saw from the Rocky Mountain Institute said the entire amount of mining needed for the transition to renewable energy by 2050 is less than the volume of coal we mined last year on this planet. So if you're worried about mining and things like that, this is a very good improvement. Another thing to worry about is what happens to people who have to breathe the air when you burn stuff. 9 million people a year on this planet die. That's one death in 5 from breathing the combustion byproducts of fossil fuel. We think of this as a huge problem in the cities of Asia, and it is. There's 5 million children in New Delhi in India. 2.5 million of them have irreversible lung damage just from breathing the air. But it's also a problem here. A new study in August found that 90,000 Americans were dying each year from breathing those, and hundreds of thousands of cases of childhood asthma, none of which we need because we do not need to be burning stuff any longer. The sun is on fire. The good Lord was kind enough to hang a large ball of burning gas 93 million miles up in the sky. We now know how to make full use of it. It would be a sin to waste all that power.
Yeah. I look at the health thing is really bad. I believe like we can solve pretty much all the problems if we plant more trees and do more solar. Those are the two things I think can combat. And of course, the plastic thing needs to go. Plastics that's another thing.
That's a whole other discussion. Absolutely.
Yeah. But I think solar, I mean, the fossil fuels, even with the cars, the electric cars are getting better and better. People are saying they used to, oh no, you can't, rev your motor and get up hills and stuff like that.
If you want to go fast in a car, EV is the way to go, man. I've been driving them forever and I'd never go back. They don't break down. They're quiet. Yeah.
I know. Noise pollution is a real thing that we have in our country. Noise pollution. And I try to even record animals and stuff, and it's hard without an airplane coming through.
You remember, I'm old enough to remember that there were ads for like expensive cars where they'd talk about how quiet they were inside, you could hear, and you don't have to pay extra for that with a EV. They're just quiet because they don't make any noise.
It's weird because I was walking the dogs this morning. I'm walking and I just hear this quiet, and I'm like, "You're sneaking up behind me."
Yeah.
But it was like, my gosh, it was because it was such a beautiful day. We just had this beautiful storm. Everything's happy. Plants are happy. And there's not this big rev the engine with a bunch of smoke coming out. And I was like, okay, we could do this. This was so cool. What about the charging stations too on the cars? I wanted to ask about that.
Charging stations are finally getting built out now around the country. Trump tried to stop the money that Biden had set aside to expand the EV charging network, but the courts wouldn't let him do it. So that $5 billion is now going out, and there's lots of these things being built. And increasingly, private companies are building EV charging stations because they know that it takes 12 minutes to charge your car fully often. And 10 or 12 minutes, you've got them there, so you build a nice little restaurant to go with it, and you've got a captive audience. It's actually a great way to travel in between, one charging
Yeah.
station to the next. So I think that range anxiety is going to be a thing of the past.
Mm.
It's
I've seen rest areas with them, and I go like, "My gosh, look at
stops.
that."
Go to
Just
those Flying J truck
Mhm.
stops now. They usually have those. They're building them with next to, those Sheetz and Wawa convenience stores back in the East,
They have good
all over the
candy.
place. They
They
do.
have good
It's
candy.
dangerous to go in there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's funny because, most of the time, since I'm not like you, I'm not traveling all the time. Most of the time, I just charge my car in my garage and it's super
Mhm.
cheap. I just connect to the solar panels on my roof and charge it up. And so for me, I've forgotten how to pump gas. I don't even quite
It's
remember how.
dirty.
I
I
just go to the gas station to get Diet Dr. Pepper, man. That's all it is for me anymore. So,
Well, to me, when you look at the gas stations and the contaminants that actually go into the ground from there versus having the electric, that's a I've watched actual plots of land in communities where there's huge arguments and it's a huge deal because you can't really do anything with this land for years because of the contamination. And
yep,
I met a guy once and his job was
yep,
to check the contamination, and he
yep.
said the biggest part of contamination is actually people putting the gas in. It's not the actual people bringing the gas in. It is actually us fueling up. We spill gas everywhere. It
Spill
goes
a quarter cup each time and it adds up. Yeah.
and it's the hugest thing, and so I think I've had people to argue with me about that there's no EV stations, and I'm like, "I travel all over.
You see them, and you're gonna
I
see
see them.
more and more and more, and in the rest of the world now, look, this is another example. The Chinese have now developed cars. The standard car now in China and the standard EV charging station, it charges in 3 or 4 minutes. Literally the same amount of time it takes to fill your gas tank. So it's all this will just keep getting better and easier all the time. That's truthfully that's why the fossil fuel industry is so freaked out and why they spent so much money bankrolling the president in the last election and on and on and on, because they know that people have come up with a better version of what they do. You can
Yeah.
get cheaper, cleaner power than you do from, Exxon or Chevron or whoever, and that scares the living daylights out of them.
Well, some have moved forward. Some have been getting better. Some companies saw this and said, "Hey, we're going to start trying to do better." And then natural gas was a big scam. Like in a way, it's just saying, "Oh, this is natural." It's like, "Here,
Natural.
just, paint it green and then
Yeah,
it's fine." You know what I
yeah.
mean? And put it on the store shelf. But with solar, like I said, like growing up that, tended camps in Kenya and stuff, that's how we lived. We
Yeah.
survived. I grew up, I didn't even realize that what was the difference until
Yep.
we moved to England. And
So the
so
good
I
news
real
now is that
yeah.
across Africa, there's in fact just a big report this week that solar is now booming across Africa because most places, as you know, in rural Africa don't have access to the grid.
Mhm,
There's no electric
mhm.
poles, and so no one. But now these communities are all building their own little individual microgrids for their village, and it's happening very fast. I've seen it across Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire and Tanzania, and, it's just amazing to watch it happen and how transformative it is.
Well, and that's the thing. And so when we talk about finance and economics, everyone jumps into technology, AI, all this stuff. I'm going solar. I mean, there's so much things to invent using solar, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And just, we were talking before about all the different appliances in your house. They all work better. A heat pump is better and cheaper than a furnace. It both heats and cools your house and does it quietly and efficiently. I love, as I said, the induction cooktop in my
Mm,
kitchen. It boils water twice as fast. And you know what? If you have a gas flame in your kitchen, your kids are 50% more likely to develop asthma. So these are things that help in all sorts of ways. And if we're lucky, they'll at least blunt the impact of climate change, which, if we don't do something about very soon, you were correctly discussing the series of disasters that you've seen as you travel around the
mm.
country. We just get more and more of them all the time. and in places that we'd never really imagined. People went to Asheville, North Carolina because they thought it was safe, and then all of a sudden it was underwater, you know?
Yeah, and it's I mean, the whole infrastructure goes down, and I think with solar and with all of what's happening for climate, like what we can do as a grassroots. Grassroots is powerful. Whenever people see the word grassroots, I always go, "Ooh, this is exciting." It's about actually doing something, everyone joining for a cause, but we get to make decisions as the consumers, as the people in this country. How do we want to use our money? If we go on a vacation, how are we, are we going to places that are thinking about the environment? If you can go to a resort that's using solar, I'm going to go there, that kind of thing. So
I
we
hear you.
have those options. And if that's your first steps, I say go
Well,
stay
that's
in a
why
bed and breakfast using a solar panel.
you
So
said
you,
it. That's
yeah,
why we're doing Sunday, is
yeah.
just to help everybody see the possibilities here. So if people go to sunday.earth, they'll get to join in all this fun that we're going to have.
Awesome. So that's September 21st, everyone. Again, Here Comes the Sun. You can't forget that title of the book. It is out now. So you can go to billmckibben.com, get it wherever you get your books. And as you know, he's also written The End of Nature. And, sometimes I really feel like that. So, it's really important for everyone to just really get involved and see what you can do. And one step leads
Absolutely.
to many. So thank you
Friend,
so much.
thank you so much. Safe travels.
Thank
Godspeed.
you.
Many thanks
Thank,
for the chance to talk.
thank you. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio. Keep up with our shows at bigblendradio.com.